A manager slaps a black girl, unaware that her father is the legendary Shaquille O'Neal. How will this story end? Subscribe to the channel, share this video, and write in the comments where you're watching us from. The soft hum of Los Angeles traffic outside was barely audible as Mira O'Neal stepped out of her car, adjusting her sunglasses against the bright Californian sun. She had parked just a block away from the upscale boutique district, wanting a moment to clear her mind before stepping into the opulence of a world she often found both alluring and alienating. The boutique loomed ahead of her, a glass-fronted masterpiece of modern luxury. Its name, Aurum, glimmered in delicate gold lettering against the spotless glass. The display window showcased mannequins draped in intricate gowns, each piece a testament to wealth, exclusivity, and status. Mira inhaled deeply, steadying herself. She had come here with a purpose, but stepping into places like this always felt like walking a tightrope. Her purpose today was simple: find the perfect dress for her high school's winter formal. It wasn't just a dance, it was her first chance to step into a world where her peers would see her as more than just the daughter of Shaquille O'Neal. Though she bore her famous father's name, Mira was determined to be known for her own achievements. She wanted to feel confident, beautiful, and wholly herself at the event. As she pushed open the boutique door, a delicate chime announced her arrival. The interior was breathtaking. White marble floors gleamed under soft, golden light, and sleek chrome racks showcased garments that looked more like art than clothing. Mira couldn't help but pause for a moment, taking in the atmosphere. There was a faint, expensive perfume in the air, something floral and citrusy, mingled with the faint hum of classical music playing in the background. Despite the luxurious surroundings, a sense of unease crept over her. The handful of employees scattered around the store all glanced at her, their gazes cool and assessing. She wasn't wearing the kind of outfit most customers here might don. A sleek tracksuit and sneakers might have been practical for her errands that morning, but they stood out starkly in a sea of couture-clad shoppers. She adjusted her ponytail, brushing off the initial looks and reminding herself why she was here. Behind the counter stood a woman who could have been mistaken for a mannequin herself. Tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored black blazer and pencil skirt, her blonde hair styled into a sharp bob. Her name tag read Jessica Marlowe, and her expression was as cold and polished as the marble beneath their feet. Mira gave her a polite smile, but Jessica merely raised a perfectly sculpted brow before returning to her tablet. Ignoring the chilly reception, Mira made her way to a rack of evening gowns. The dresses were stunning, soft silks and shimmery satins in every shade imaginable. She reached out, her fingers grazing the fabric of a midnight blue gown that shimmered like the ocean under moonlight. It was perfect. She could already imagine herself in it, the way it would flow as she walked. "Excuse me," she said, turning toward Jessica. "Could I try this on?" Jessica didn't look up from her tablet. "Are you sure you're in the right store?" she asked, her tone dripping with condescension. Mira froze, unsure if she had heard correctly. The question hung in the air, sharp and cutting. She glanced around, half expecting to see someone else Jessica might be addressing, but there was no one nearby. "I'm pretty sure I am," Mira said, keeping her voice steady. "I'd like to try this dress." Jessica finally looked up, her eyes narrowing as she studied Mira from head to toe. It was a slow, deliberate gaze, one meant to intimidate. "That dress," Jessica said, her voice low and edged with sarcasm, "is part of our exclusive collection. It's not something we typically let everyone try on." Mira felt a spark of anger flare within her chest. "I'm a customer," she said firmly. "I don't see why I can't try it on." Jessica's lips curled into a tight, insincere smile. "Of course, you're a customer," she said, her words laced with mockery. "But we have certain policies about handling delicate pieces. Perhaps I could recommend something more suitable." The words stung. Mira was no stranger to judgment. Being the daughter of a public figure came with its own set of assumptions and prejudices. But this felt different. This wasn't just about her name or her family. This was about her, standing here in her tracksuit and sneakers, being deemed unworthy of something because of how she looked. Mira drew a deep breath, willing herself to stay calm. "I'd like to try on this dress," she repeated, holding her ground. Jessica's smile vanished. She stepped out from behind the counter, heels clicking sharply against the marble floor as she approached Mira. Her movements were deliberate, almost predatory, and her voice dropped to a near whisper. "Girls like you don't belong here," she hissed, her words barely audible but cutting through the air like a blade. For a moment, Mira was too stunned to respond. The words echoed in her mind, their meaning sinking in slowly. She clenched her fists and the anger bubbling just beneath the surface, but before she could say anything, Jessica stepped back, her expression once again composed. "Let me know if you need any further assistance," Jessica said, with an air of finality, turning on her heel and walking away. Mira stood frozen, her mind racing. The weight of the interaction pressed down on her, but she refused to let it break her. She wasn't leaving without that dress, or at least without making her voice heard. As the boutique's pristine elegance loomed around her, Mira felt a fire ignite within her chest. This wasn't just about a dress anymore. This was about standing up for herself and refusing to let anyone make her feel small. The fire in Mira's chest burned hotter as she stood in the center of the boutique, clutching the midnight blue gown. The soft hum of classical music seemed to mock her, as if the serene atmosphere could erase the sting of Jessica's words. She felt the judgmental eyes of the boutique staff on her, their silent gazes fueling her resolve. She wasn't going to back down. Mira walked toward the fitting rooms, the dress draped over her arm. Her sneakers squeaked faintly against the marble floor, a sound that seemed out of place in the quiet opulence of the store. Jessica's sharp voice cut through the air behind her. "Miss, I must insist you stop right there." Mira turned slowly, meeting Jessica's cold stare. The woman was standing by the counter, her arms crossed, an expression of irritation etched on her face. "Excuse me?" Mira asked, keeping her tone even. Jessica's lips pressed into a thin line. "That gown is a part of our premium collection. We don't allow—" She paused, her eyes narrowing as she seemed to search for the right words. "Everyone to handle these pieces? Perhaps you'd like to look at something more accessible." The emphasis on the word accessible was a dagger aimed at Mira's pride. Her fingers tightened around the soft fabric of the dress. "I'm not just handling it, I'm trying it on," she said firmly. Jessica's gaze flicked to the dress, then back to Mira. Her condescension was almost palpable. "And how exactly do you intend to pay for it?" she asked, her voice low but cutting. Mira felt her jaw tighten. "That's none of your business." Jessica took a step closer, her heels clicking ominously against the floor. "It becomes my business when someone comes into this store and starts touching things they can't afford," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "I've seen this before. People like you." Mira's heart pounded in her chest. She could feel the heat rising to her face, a mix of anger and disbelief. "People like me?" She wanted to scream the words back at Jessica to demand an explanation, but she held herself in check. Instead, she met Jessica's gaze, refusing to look away. "I'm not leaving," Mira said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "I'm going to try on this dress." Jessica's eyes flashed with irritation, but she didn't back down. Instead, she straightened her posture as if preparing for a battle. "If you don't leave the gown where it is and exit the store, I will call security," she said, her voice cold and unwavering. The threat hung in the air, heavy and oppressive. Mira could feel her pulse in her ears, the sound drowning out the soft classical music. She glanced around the boutique, catching the wary eyes of a few other customers. Some looked away quickly, pretending not to notice, while others watched with a mix of curiosity and discomfort. A woman, standing near a rack of handbags, seemed on the verge of speaking, but then hesitated, glancing at Jessica before turning her attention back to the merchandise. No one was going to intervene. Mira was on her own. "No," Mira said, her voice loud enough to draw the attention of everyone in the store. "You're not calling security. I'm a customer, and I have every right to try on this dress." Jessica's composure cracked for the briefest moment, her eyes widening slightly before narrowing again. "You're causing a scene," she said through gritted teeth. "I'm asking you politely to leave before this escalates further." Mira's hands trembled, not with fear, but with anger. She wasn't going to let this woman intimidate her. Not today. Not ever. "You're the one escalating it," Mira shot back. "All I did was pick out a dress. You're the one making assumptions about me, and frankly, I'm tired of it." Jessica took another step closer, her expression darkening. For a moment, Mira thought she might actually back down, but then Jessica's hand shot out, grabbing the dress from Mira's arm. "Give me that," Jessica snapped, tugging the gown sharply. Mira held on, refusing to let go. "What is your problem?" she demanded, her voice rising. "You can't just grab things out of people's hands." "I can, when I'm protecting store property," Jessica retorted. Her grip on the dress tightened, and she pulled harder. The gown slipped from Mira's grasp, the delicate fabric bunching in Jessica's hands. Mira reached out instinctively to grab it back, but before she could, Jessica's hand lashed out, striking her across the cheek in a sharp, stinging slap. The sound of the slap echoed through the boutique, silencing the room. Mira staggered back a step, her hand flying to her face. For a moment, she couldn't process what had just happened. Her cheek burned, both from the impact and from the humiliation. Jessica froze, her eyes wide with shock, as if she couldn't believe what she'd just done. The boutique fell into an uneasy silence broken only by the faint strains of classical music still playing over the speakers. Mira's mind raced. She could feel tears threatening to well up, but she forced them back, refusing to let Jessica see her cry. Instead, she took a deep breath, her fingers curling into fists at her sides. "You just hit me," Mira said, her voice trembling with a mix of disbelief and anger. Jessica opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. She seemed momentarily paralyzed, her hand still clutching the dress as if it were a lifeline. "You just hit me," Mira repeated, louder this time. Her voice cracked, but she didn't care. She wanted everyone in the store to hear her. "You think you can treat people like this and get away with it?" The other customers stared, their expressions a mix of shock and discomfort. No one moved. No one spoke. Mira could feel their eyes on her, but none of them stepped forward to help. Jessica finally seemed to regain her composure. She straightened her back, her face hardening into a mask of cold indifference, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave," she said, her voice tight and controlled. "You're no longer welcome in this store." Mira's eyes burned with unshed tears, but she refused to let them fall. She took another deep breath, forcing herself to stand tall. She wasn't going to let Jessica see her break. "Fine," Mira said, her voice low but steady. "But this isn't over." She turned on her heel and walked toward the door, her sneakers squeaking softly against the marble floor. As she reached the exit, she glanced back over her shoulder. Jessica was still standing in the center of the boutique, clutching the midnight blue gown. The boutique's opulent interior seemed to close in on her as Mira pushed the door open and stepped out into the bright afternoon sun. The cool air hit her face, soothing the sting on her cheek, but doing little to calm the storm raging inside her. Her mind was already racing with thoughts of what to do next. She wasn't going to let this go. Jessica Marlowe might think she could get away with treating people like this, but Mira was determined to prove her wrong. This wasn't just about a dress anymore. This was about standing up for herself and for anyone else who had ever been made to feel small. The boutique door closed behind Mira with a heavy finality, the faint chime of its bell barely audible over the roar of her thoughts. She stood on the sidewalk, her hands trembling as the adrenaline coursed through her. Her cheek still stung from Jessica's slap, but it was the deeper wound, the humiliation, the anger that burned brighter. The California sun, warm and unrelenting, pressed down on her as she pulled her phone out of her pocket. Her reflection stared back at her on the screen. Wide, fiery eyes and the faint red mark blooming across her cheek. For a moment, she hesitated, her thumb hovering over the camera icon. Sharing what had just happened felt vulnerable, exposing her to the judgment of millions. But then she thought of Jessica's smug expression, the words laced with disdain. "People like you." No, she wasn't going to let this moment pass in silence. She tapped the camera app and flipped it to record. Her voice was steady, though she could hear the tremor beneath the surface. "My name is Mira O'Neill," she began, holding the phone at arm's length to capture her face and the boutique's elegant facade behind her. "This is what happens when you walk into a store and someone decides you don't belong. Today, a woman inside this boutique didn't just insult me, she hit me." She let the words hang for a moment, her cheek throbbing as if to emphasize the point. "People need to see this," she continued, her voice gaining strength, "because it's not just me. This happens to people every day, people who don't have a platform, who don't have a voice. And it's time we start holding people accountable." She stopped the recording and immediately uploaded it to her social media accounts. The caption was simple but powerful. "This isn't just about me. It's about everyone who's ever been made to feel less than. #stand up #say no to discrimination." As she hit post, a small part of her worried about what would come next. She had grown up in the public eye, her every move scrutinized because of her father's fame. But this wasn't about him. This was about her, and about something bigger than any single person. The notification pinged almost immediately, a flood of comments and shares rolling in faster than she could process. Her followers, millions strong thanks to her father's fame and her own growing presence, were outraged. Messages of support poured in, but so did the trolls. She expected that. The internet was never without its share of cynics. Still holding her phone, she began to walk. Her sneakers hit the pavement with determination as she replayed the events in her mind. Every insult, every icy stare, every moment Jessica had tried to belittle her replayed like a loop, each memory fueling her anger. She wasn't going to let this slide. Hours later, Mira sat cross-legged on her bed, the glow of her phone lighting up the darkened room. The video had gone viral. Millions of views, hundreds of thousands of comments. Prominent figures were retweeting her post, adding their voices to the growing chorus of outrage. Activists, celebrities, even strangers shared their own stories of discrimination, turning her single video into a rallying cry. A notification caught her attention, a direct message from one of her closest friends, Lila. "OMG, Mira, I just saw your video. Are you okay? What happened?" Mira hesitated before typing back. How do you explain something like this? She didn't want to come off as weak, but she also didn't want to brush it off. Finally, she wrote, "I'm okay now, but it was bad, Lila, really bad. She slapped me, literally slapped me." The response came almost instantly. "What? That's insane. You need to do something about this, like legal action or something." Mira stared at the message, the idea settling in her mind. Legal action. Could she? Should she? Her instinct was to fight back, but the thought of navigating lawsuits, media coverage, and endless questions made her stomach churn. She wasn't afraid of confrontation, but this felt massive, bigger than her. And yet, wasn't that the point? This wasn't just about her. It was about setting a precedent, about standing up for everyone who couldn't. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a call from her father. She hesitated, her thumb hovering over the screen. She knew what he'd say. He'd want to protect her, to shield her from the backlash. But Mira didn't want protection. She wanted justice. Finally, she answered. "Hey, Dad." "Mira," Shaquille O'Neal's deep, familiar voice rumbled through the line. "I just saw your video. Are you okay? What happened? Talk to me." She took a deep breath and began to recount the day's events, starting from the moment she stepped into the boutique. Her voice wavered only once when she described the slap, the shock of it still fresh in her mind. There was a long silence on the other end of the line before her father spoke again, his voice tight with barely contained anger. "She hit you?" he asked, the words heavy with disbelief. "She put her hands on you?" "Yes," Mira said quietly. "I'm coming over," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "We're not letting this slide." When Shaquille arrived at Mira's apartment later that evening, his towering frame filled the doorway. Despite his larger-than-life presence, his first move was to pull Mira into a hug, holding her tightly as if to shield her from the world. "I'm proud of you," he said softly, "for standing up for yourself. But we're going to take this further. They're not getting away with this." Mira nodded, her resolve strengthening in his presence. Together, they began to strategize. Shaquille made calls to his legal team, while Mira reached out to activists and influencers who had shown support online. The next step, they decided, was to expose the boutique's history. If Jessica had treated her this way, there was a good chance she had done it to others. Over the next few days, the momentum grew. News outlets picked up the story, and more people came forward with their own experiences at the boutique. A former employee anonymously shared that Jessica had a pattern of discriminatory behavior, providing chilling anecdotes that mirrored Mira's experience. Mira stayed active on social media, sharing updates and amplifying the voices of others. She refused to let the narrative shift away from the larger issue of systemic discrimination. It wasn't just about her. It was about a culture that allowed people like Jessica to operate unchecked. The turning point came when the boutique's corporate office released a statement. They apologized for the incident, announced that Jessica had been suspended pending investigation and promised to implement diversity training for their staff. But for Mira, it wasn't enough. Words were easy, actions mattered more. As she sat at her desk late one night drafting another post, she felt a surge of determination. This wasn't over. It couldn't be. She was just getting started. The next morning, Mira woke up to the incessant buzz of her phone vibrating on the nightstand. The screen lit up with a barrage of notifications, mentions, direct messages, and calls. Her video had taken on a life of its own overnight, and now it seemed like the whole world was watching. She unlocked her phone and immediately noticed something different. News headlines splashed across social media platforms carried her name. Daughter of NBA legend Shaquille O'Neal shares harrowing tale of boutique discrimination, and Shaq's daughter calls out racial bias in high-end retail store. The comments on her video had shifted dramatically. People weren't just reacting to the incident, they were reacting to who she was. Her heart sank. This was exactly what she hadn't wanted. The narrative was no longer about the systemic issue, it was about her celebrity connection. She put the phone down and ran a hand through her hair, frustration bubbling inside her. This wasn't supposed to be about her father. It was supposed to be about standing up to discrimination. A knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Mira opened it to find her father standing there, a determined look on his face. Despite the early hour, he was dressed sharply in a tailored suit, his imposing frame filling the doorway. "Morning, kiddo," Shaquille said, stepping inside. He glanced at her phone, buzzing noisily on the counter. "I take it you've seen the headlines?" Mira nodded, folding her arms across her chest. "This isn't how I wanted it to go, Dad. Now everyone's just focusing on me being your daughter, not the real issue." Shaquille placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Listen to me. You didn't choose to be my daughter, but you did choose to stand up for what's right. That's what people will remember. And if my name helps shine a bigger light on this, then so be it. We can use it to our advantage." Mira sighed, her frustration giving way to determination. He was right. If the attention was already there, she might as well use it to push the message further. "Okay," she said finally, "what do we do now?" Within hours, Shaquille had mobilized his network. His legal team was on standby, drafting statements and preparing to escalate the issue if necessary. Meanwhile, Mira worked with a publicist to organize a press conference. She hated the idea of stepping into the spotlight, but if it meant holding people like Jessica accountable, it was worth it. By midday, a press conference was set up outside Shaquille's estate. A podium stood in the driveway, surrounded by neatly arranged microphones. Reporters gathered, their cameras trained on the O'Neal family as they stepped forward. Mira stood beside her father, her heart pounding as she faced the crowd. Shaquille began, his deep voice commanding the attention of everyone present. "Good afternoon. I'm here today not as an NBA player, not as a public figure, but as a father who watched his daughter experience something no one should ever have to go through." He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd. "This isn't just about Mira. It's about the thousands, millions of people who face discrimination every day and don't have the platform to speak out. Today, we're demanding accountability. Not just from one person or one store, but from an entire system that allows this behavior to thrive." Mira stepped forward, clutching the edges of the podium to steady herself. Her voice was shaky at first, but grew stronger with each word. "What happened to me wasn't an isolated incident. It's part of a pattern. a pattern that tells people they don't belong, that they're not good enough because of how they look or where they come from. I'm here to say that enough is enough. Her words resonated, sparking a wave of applause from the crowd. Reporters shouted questions, but Shaquille raised a hand, signaling the end of the conference. The message had been delivered, loud and clear. As the day unfolded, the response was overwhelming. Major news outlets picked up the story, and public figures from all walks of life voiced their support. Celebrities shared their own experiences with discrimination, adding their voices to the growing movement. Meanwhile, the boutique was thrust into the center of a media storm. Former employees began coming forward anonymously, sharing their own stories of mistreatment at the hands of Jessica Marlowe. One ex-employee recounted how Jessica had routinely profiled customers based on their appearance, often refusing to serve anyone she deemed unworthy of the store's luxury image. The boutique's corporate office released a second statement, more detailed than the first. They expressed deep regret over the incident, confirmed Jessica's suspension, and announced plans to review their hiring practices and customer service policies. But for Mira, it still wasn't enough. Apologies were just words. She wanted to see real change. That evening, as Mira scrolled through the flood of messages on her phone, she stumbled upon something that stopped her cold. A private message from a young girl, no older than 15, read, "Thank you for sharing your story. I've been through something similar, and seeing you stand up for yourself makes me feel like I can too." Mira felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. This was why she had done it. For every person who had ever been made to feel small, to feel invisible. She screenshot the message and sent it to her father with a simple caption, "This is what it's all about." Shaquille replied almost immediately, "Proud of you, kid. This is just the beginning." The next day, Mira sat down for an exclusive interview with a prominent journalist. She recounted the incident in vivid detail, her voice steady and unwavering. She spoke not only about what had happened to her, but also about the broader issue of systemic discrimination in retail spaces. "What do you hope to achieve by speaking out?" the journalist asked, leaning forward in her chair. Mira didn't hesitate. "I want accountability. I want people to know that they don't have to accept this kind of treatment. And I want businesses to realize that they can't keep ignoring these issues. It's time for change." The interview aired that evening, and the response was immediate. Social media erupted with hashtags like #JusticeForMira and #EndDiscrimination. The movement had taken on a life of its own, and Mira found herself at the center of it. That night, as she sat on her bed scrolling through the day's events, she felt a sense of accomplishment she hadn't expected. This was bigger than her now. It was a movement, and she was ready to see it through. Her phone buzzed with another message from her father. "Tomorrow we talk strategy. Time to turn this into something even bigger." Mira smiled, her determination renewed. This wasn't just about fighting back. It was about making sure no one else ever had to fight this battle alone. The next morning, Mira stood in front of the mirror in her room, steeling herself for what lay ahead. Today, she and her father were heading back to the boutique, not as customers, but as forces of accountability. The events of the past few days had snowballed into something far beyond what Mira had initially imagined. Yet now, as she prepared to face Jessica Marlowe again, she felt a mix of anger and resolve burning in her chest. Downstairs, Shaquille O'Neal was already waiting, his usual jovial demeanor replaced with a grim determination. His presence alone was commanding, But today he was more than just a towering figure. He was a father on a mission, and his focus sharpened Mira's own resolve. "You ready for this?" Shaquille asked as she joined him in the living room. "As ready as I'll ever be," Mira replied, her voice steady despite the flutter of nerves in her stomach. "Remember, this isn't just about you," Shaquille said, his hand resting on her shoulder. "This is about setting an example. You've already done something amazing by speaking out. Now we make sure they know this isn't going away." They left the house together, stepping into a sleek black SUV that was already waiting in the driveway. As they drove toward the boutique, Mira scrolled through her phone, seeing the hashtags and messages that had continued to flood social media. People were demanding action, not just against Jessica, but against the broader culture that allowed such behavior to persist. When they arrived at the boutique, the scene outside was a stark contrast to the quiet luxury Mira had experienced days before. A small crowd of reporters and onlookers had gathered, their cameras trained on the entrance. Mira felt a pang of anxiety, but reminded herself why she was here. Shaquille stepped out of the car first, his immense frame drawing immediate attention. Cameras flashed and voices called out, but he ignored them, holding a hand out to help Mira step onto the sidewalk. Together, they walked into the boutique, the glass doors swinging open with a soft chime. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. The staff looked up, their faces a mix of apprehension and unease. Mira noticed the absence of Jessica Marlowe behind the counter, but before she could process it, a man in a tailored suit approached them. He introduced himself as the boutique's regional manager, his expression carefully composed. "Mr. O'Neill, Miss O'Neill," the man began, his voice polite but strained. "We've been expecting you. Please, let's talk in private." Shaquille's expression hardened. "We'll talk," he said, his voice low and commanding. "But I want Jessica here. She's the one who needs to answer for her actions." The manager hesitated, glancing toward one of the side offices. After a moment, he nodded and signaled for someone to fetch her. Minutes later, Jessica Marlowe walked into the room, her usual air of icy confidence noticeably shaken. She was dressed impeccably, as always, but there was a nervousness in her posture that hadn't been there before. Her eyes flicked briefly to Mira before settling on the manager, as if hoping to avoid the confrontation entirely. "Jessica," the manager said, his tone firm. "These are the O'Neills. I believe you're already acquainted." Jessica's jaw tightened and she forced a tight smile. "Yes, of course." Mira stepped forward, her heart pounding but her resolve unshaken. "You know exactly why I'm here," she said, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "What you did to me wasn't just disrespectful. It was violent, discriminatory, and completely unacceptable." Jessica opened her mouth to respond, but Shaquille raised a hand, silencing her. "You slapped my daughter," he said, his voice calm but heavy with anger. "You humiliated her, and you thought you'd get away with it. Well, you didn't." Jessica's carefully constructed facade began to crack. Look, I was just doing my job," she stammered, her voice trembling slightly. "I didn't mean—" "You didn't mean what?" Mira interjected, her voice rising. "You didn't mean to insult me? To make assumptions about me based on how I look? To physically assault me because you thought you could?" Jessica's face flushed, and she looked to the manager for support, but he remained silent, his expression unreadable. Shaquille stepped closer, towering over Jessica. "Let me be clear," he said, his voice like thunder. "This isn't going away. You don't get to treat people like this and hide behind excuses. My daughter is standing here today because she refuses to let this happen to anyone else. And I'm standing with her." Jessica's composure shattered entirely. "I'm sorry," she blurted out, her voice cracking. "I wasn't thinking, Mira held up a hand, cutting her off. "It's too late for apologies. What I want, what everyone watching this wants, is accountability. Not just from you, but from this entire company." The manager finally spoke, his tone conciliatory. "Miss O'Neill, I want to assure you that we take this matter very seriously. Jessica has been suspended, and we're conducting a thorough review of our policies and training programs. We're also committed to implementing new measures to ensure that incidents like this never happen again." Mira narrowed her eyes, scrutinizing his words. "Words are easy," she said, "but actions matter more. If you're serious about change, you'll make those measures public. You'll show your customers and your employees that this kind of behavior won't be tolerated." The manager nodded, his expression sincere. "You have my word. We'll make this right." Shaquille placed a hand on Mira's shoulder, signaling that it was time to leave. "We'll be watching," he said, his tone a warning. "If you don't follow through, you'll hear from us again." As they walked out of the boutique, Mira felt a sense of closure, but also a lingering frustration. The confrontation was only a small step in a much larger fight. She knew there was still so much work to be done, but for now she could take pride in standing her ground. Outside, the crowd of reporters erupted into questions as they exited the store. Mira paused, turning to face them. "This isn't just about me," she said, her voice steady and clear. "This is about holding people accountable and making sure no one else has to go through what I did. And we're just getting started." As she and Shaquille walked back to the car, Mira felt a new sense of purpose settle over her. The fight wasn't over, but she was ready for whatever came next. The days following the confrontation at the boutique felt like a whirlwind. Mira found herself at the center of a movement that had grown far beyond her personal story. The viral video of her initial encounter, coupled with the press conference and her father's public support, had sparked a global conversation about discrimination, privilege, and the unseen struggles of those without a platform to speak out. Mira sat in her room, scrolling through the flood of messages on her phone. Each notification brought a mix of emotions. Some were messages of support from strangers who thanked her for her bravery. Others were stories from people who had experienced similar injustices, each one a heartbreaking reminder of why she had chosen to speak out. And then there were the trolls, angry, dismissive voices that tried to belittle her experience. But Mira had grown up in the public eye. She knew how to handle negativity. What mattered most was the overwhelming support and the chance to make a real difference. Her phone buzzed with a call from her father. "Mira," Shaquille's deep voice rumbled, "we need to take this to the next level." "What do you mean?" Mira asked, leaning back against her bed. "You've started something bigger than just a viral video," Shaquille said. "People are listening. It's time to turn this momentum into real change. I've got some people who want to help." The following day, Mira and Shaquille met with a group of civil rights activists, social justice advocates, and public relations experts at Shaquille's home. The room buzzed with energy as they brainstormed ways to amplify Mira's message and use her platform to bring about systemic change. One of the activists, a middle-aged woman named Evelyn Carter, leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. "Mira, your story is powerful because it's personal," she said. "But if we want to create lasting change, we need to connect it to a broader narrative. This isn't just about one boutique or one manager. It's about a culture of discrimination that exists in so many spaces. Mira nodded, absorbing Evelyn's words. "So, what do we do?" she asked. "We start by gathering more stories," Evelyn replied. "If people see that this isn't an isolated incident, they'll be more likely to demand change. And we can use those stories to push for better policies, not just in retail, but in workplaces, schools, everywhere." Another activist, a young man named Jordan, chimed in. "We should also create a resource for people who face discrimination. Legal aid, emotional support, even just a place to share their experiences. You've already got the attention. Now we need to build something lasting." Shaquille spoke up, his voice steady and commanding. "Whatever we do, it has to be big. People are watching. Let's give them something they can rally behind." Over the next few weeks, Mira threw herself into the work. She and her team launched a campaign called #StandUpTogether, a platform that encouraged people to share their experiences with discrimination and offered resources for those seeking help. The stories poured in, thousands of them, each one a testament to the pervasive nature of prejudice. Mira began to speak out more publicly, participating in interviews, panel discussions, and social media live streams. Each time she told her story, she felt a mix of vulnerability and empowerment. It wasn't easy to relive the incident, but she knew it was necessary. Her voice was reaching people, and that was what mattered. One particularly powerful moment came during a live-streamed conversation with a group of young women who had faced similar experiences. As they shared their stories, Mira listened intently, her heart aching for each of them. "I know how hard it is to stand up," she said, her voice soft but firm. "It's terrifying to feel like you're alone, like no one will believe you. But you're not alone. We're all in this together. And the more we speak out, the harder it becomes for people to ignore us." The live stream went viral, sparking another wave of support and media attention. But Mira wasn't interested in fame. She wanted results. One evening, as Mira sat at her desk reviewing plans for the next phase of the campaign, her phone buzzed with a message from Evelyn. It contained a link to a news article about a high-end retailer that had announced sweeping changes to its policies in response to Mira's story. The company had committed to implementing diversity training, creating a more inclusive hiring process, and establishing a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. Mira felt a surge of hope. This was what she had been fighting for. Real, tangible change. She forwarded the article to her father, adding a simple message: "We're making progress." Shaquille replied almost immediately, "Proud of you, kid, but we're not done yet." As the weeks turned into months, Mira's campaign continued to grow. She partnered with legal organizations to offer free consultations for victims of discrimination. She worked with schools and community groups to promote education about bias and inclusion. And through it all, she kept telling her story, refusing to let the momentum fade. But it wasn't just about the big victories. Mira found herself deeply moved by the smaller moments. The private messages from people who said her story had inspired them to stand up for themselves. The parents who thanked her for being a role model for their children. These were the moments that reminded her why she had started this journey. One day, as Mira scrolled through the campaign's website, she came across a story from a young woman in a small town who had faced discrimination at her workplace. The woman wrote about how she had felt powerless until she saw Mira's video. Inspired, she had confronted her manager and filed a formal complaint, leading to changes in the company's policies. Mira felt tears prick her eyes as she read the story. This was what it was all about. empowering people to stand up for themselves and demand better. She screenshot the story and sent it to Evelyn with a message. "This is why we keep going." Evelyn replied, "And this is just the beginning." Mira smiled, her resolve stronger than ever. She knew the fight was far from over, but she was ready for whatever came next. Together, they were making a difference. One voice, one story, one step at a time. The warm California sun filtered through the trees as Mira and Shaquille stood in front of a vast open field in downtown Los Angeles. Rows of white tents flanked either side, bustling with volunteers setting up racks of clothing, tables stacked with shoes, and boxes filled with accessories. The air buzzed with energy and anticipation. Today marked the culmination of everything they had been working toward, a large-scale community event to give back, amplify voices, and provide tangible support for those in need. Mira walked alongside her father, scanning the setup. She still couldn't believe how far things had come since that fateful day in the boutique. What had started as a personal ordeal had transformed into a movement of solidarity and action. And now, standing in the midst of it all, she felt a surge of pride, not for herself, but for the countless people who had rallied around the cause. "Looks good," Shaquille said, his deep voice carrying over the commotion. "This is what it's all about." Mira nodded, her lips curving into a small smile. "It's amazing. I just hope it makes a difference." "It already is," Shaquille replied, gesturing towards the growing line of attendees gathering at the entrance. Families, individuals, and children had begun to arrive, their faces a mixture of curiosity and gratitude. "You've given people hope, Mira. That's bigger than any dress or store." The event officially began with a speech from Mira. Standing on a makeshift stage at the center of the field, she looked out at the crowd, a sea of faces, diverse and vibrant, all united by a shared sense of purpose. "Thank you all for being here today," she began, her voice steady and clear. "When this journey started, it was about a single moment of injustice. But what I've learned is that my story isn't unique. It's one of countless stories of people who have been judged, dismissed, or excluded simply because of who they are." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Today, we're here to say that enough is enough. We're here to take action, not just with words, but with deeds. This isn't just about one person or one movement. It's about creating a world where everyone feels valued, respected, and seen." The crowd erupted into applause, and Mira stepped back, her chest swelling with a mixture of pride and humility. Shaquille joined her on stage, his towering presence commanding attention as he took the microphone. "This is about community," Shaquille said, his voice booming across the field. "It's about lifting each other up and making sure no one gets left behind. Mira taught me that even the smallest action can spark something big. So let's keep sparking. Let's keep pushing. And let's make sure this isn't just a moment. It's a movement." Throughout the day, the event hummed with activity. Volunteers handed out clothing, helping families find items that fit and suited their needs. A local catering company donated food, setting up a buffet where attendees could enjoy hot meals. Community organizations had booths offering services ranging from job training to mental health resources. Mira moved through the tents, interacting with attendees and listening to their stories. A woman approached her, holding the hand of her young daughter. "Thank you for doing this," the woman said, her voice thick with emotion. "We've been struggling, and it means so much to see people care." Mira smiled warmly, kneeling to speak to the little girl. "What's your name?" "Kayla," the girl said shyly. "Well, Kayla," Mira said, "I'm really glad you're here. You're going to look amazing in whatever you pick out today." The girl beamed, and her mother mouthed a quiet "thank you" before moving on. Moments like these reminded Mira why this work was so important. It wasn't just about grand gestures, it was about the human connections that made change possible. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a golden glow over the event, Shaquille gathered the volunteers and attendees for a final moment of reflection. Standing in the center of the field, he held up a large whiteboard with bold black letters that read, "A world without prejudice starts with us." "This is our promise," he said, his voice steady and resolute, "to keep fighting, to keep building, and to keep believing in a better future. But we can't do it alone. It takes all of us." The crowd responded with a resounding cheer, and Mira felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She glanced at her father, who gave her a small nod of encouragement. Together, they held the board high, a symbol of hope and determination. As the event wound down, Mira sat on the edge of the stage, watching families leave with bags of clothing and renewed spirits. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that they had made a tangible difference. Evelyn Carter, one of the activists who had been instrumental in the campaign, joined her, a cup of coffee in hand. "You did good today," Evelyn said, her voice warm. "We all did," Mira replied, "but there's still so much more to do." "There always is," Evelyn said with a smile, "but you've shown people that change is possible. That's a start." Mira nodded, gazing out at the field. The fight wasn't over. It never would be. But today they had taken a step forward, and that was enough for now. Later that night, as Mira and Shaquille returned home, they sat together in the living room, reflecting on the day. "You've made me proud, kiddo," Shaquille said, his voice soft, "not just for what you've done, but for who you are." Mira leaned against his shoulder, her heart full. "Thanks, Dad. I couldn't have done it without you." He chuckled. "That's what family's for." As the house grew quiet, Mira felt a sense of peace settle over her. The journey had been difficult, but it had also been transformative. And while the road ahead was long, she knew she wasn't walking it alone. Together, they had sparked something bigger than themselves, a movement that would continue to grow, driven by the voices and stories of countless others. And in that, Mira found hope for the future. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next one. Check out our other videos for more compelling tales, and don't forget to share this video with your friends. Your support helps us keep telling these stories.